Hey Internet, it's your weekly DM chats here on Roll for Trouble. Yeah, for some odd reason I really thought that was not right. It's been a long day, my brain is fried. Oh, somebody lost their dog. AKA a child. Well, that's unfortunate. Sorry. So, today, we're going to be talking about how to build, I guess, aspects of your story to help make it fun for your players, I guess. So in the recent, or one of the two most recent episodes of Tales from Cyril, the band of adventurers has set out upon basically a Scooby-Doo mystery hunt, going forth and tracking down six.
Just realized Kerbal Yapping Loki is full in the background.
Whew, distractions are immense tonight. Scooby-Doo Adventures, Whodunits. So I was actually going to talk about the one that they solved, and how I went about building that. So I have my notes, whoosh, or whoosh, however you want to look at it. And basically I answer a few questions for myself that I think the characters or the players might try and where they might try and go. So it is a little bit about determining and trying to anticipate your character or your players. But the main thing, I think, is that you have to decide, of course, beforehand who done it. The ultimate answer is you have to know the answer to the mystery. So with Snow, I had decided exactly, who it was that had kidnapped him, which was Quincy Bobble. That was his name, is his name. I had a little bit of a backstory for him, and why he's doing this. And I came up with exactly the outline of what happened when he was kidnapped. And the long and short of it is basically I was like, Snow was going home one night to his nest. And if you're just tuning in and you have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about a griffin. Griffins are like my thing. So if you're like, nest, what the shit? But yeah, so griffins, they're a thing. If you haven't actually watched any of them, maybe go watch a couple of episodes and you'll get it. And if also, spoiler alert, I should have put that in the beginning. If you haven't watched any of them, I'm totally going to spoil one of the episodes for you. Already have, so I'm so sorry. Like I said, it's been a long day. My muggle job is really kicking my butt. So I decided, I knew exactly what was going to happen, and that Quincy found or followed Snow home one night. Basically clonked him on the back of the head, aka pounced on him and rendered him unconscious, and then hefted him up and took him off to Quincy's nest, where he was then restrained and kept basically prisoner. But some of the things that I, as far as that was concerned, is like, what information will the players find? So I tried to determine what were key locations for the actual story. So Snow works at a brothel. So I said, okay, in this brothel, does he have friends? Does he have enemies? Who's his boss? What would the players find there? Because that's probably the most logical place to start is his workplace, or his home. And also in the fact that I handed out I gave the players basically dossiers for the missing people, which detailed information such as, which I was beautifully handed. So, this is the dossier that I made. So it says, it has the name, it has, their race, Griffin, how old he was, where he works, who he was reported missing by, description of the missing, where they were last seen, who the guards originally assigned to this had interviewed, and his place of employment. So that was all there for the players, which I figured would be basic information that guards would kind of have and have written down when piling these things. So I'm no law official, but I can use logic. So it was kind of intended that they would obviously start at the brothel. I figured that would probably be the best and the most logical choice for them. So in my notes, it has clues in their locations. So one of the things you have to be very conscious of when you're building an encounter or any sort of whodunit is that your mystery cannot, or the solving of that mystery cannot hinge on one piece of clue or one piece of information alone. When you think about it, in all reality, aside from outside of media, there are so many clues in everyone's daily life that point to your actions, your relationships, and I think that's very important. It's just a matter of how people interpret that those pieces of information to come up with a story about your life. So you really don't want to pin the solving of your mystery on one piece of information, because you're very dependent on the fact that your players have to roll well in order to find that piece of information, especially if it's well hidden. It's a well-placed question or a piece of information that somebody knows. So you really want to make sure that you have a smattering of clues that allow them to piece together at least a partial story. So I'm terrible with writing up DCs ahead of time. I never do. I kind of go by DCs on the fly. That's just how I play. Because it's tedious for me when I'm writing my notes to be like, and this DC for this thing is this. It's tedious for me, so I just don't do it. But in my notes, I started out with clues in their location. So I had the Feather Fan, which is the name of the brothel that Snow was at, and his dressing room, so to speak. And I had an idea of all of these things that would be available for the players to find in this location. And I believe they actually found pretty much everything there, at least in the dressing room. They found the box of gifts, they found a journal, and they also found some other culturally important items for griffins that led them to making assumptions. And things that they didn't do, I had the intention that if they wanted to ask, they might be able to talk Lady Minstrel, the owner of the brothel, into letting them see her ledger. Who was it that visited Snow more often? Maybe they could get a clue that way. It would have been a social encounter for them to convince her to give up her ledger. Thank you. And be able to go through it, because obviously in these kinds of places people pay for anonymity. Another thing was that they could ask, besides just Copper, who was Snow's best friend and companion in the brothel, was other workers. And so I'd also come up with someone who was very jealous of Snow, Jade. I don't know if I intentionally did that or not, but so she was someone else they might have been able to talk to. And they would have learned that he was a relatively newcomer to the brothel, and that Lady Minstrel kind of fawned over him because he was so unique in his coloring that allowed a lot of people to be like, ooh, I want that guy, So, and she was a long time worker, so she felt kind of jaded, in that this newcomer had come along and kind of taken her thunder. I do?
Yeah. How do you manage when people get stuck, or worse, when they come to the wrong conclusion entirely?
I mean...
Because that never happened.
So the wrong conclusion, I think that boils down to making sure that you have enough clues. I mean, you can't predict how people are going to interpret them. But as a DM, and for me, I like rolling with the punches, kind of seeing where the story goes and what crazy, wonderful ideas that my players come up with. So it's, when plotting these kinds of things, it's just kind of putting everything there and allowing them to wander around. And again, it goes back to also making sure that you have multiple clues in multiple locations. So, you know, for me it was they could go to his stable stall or his dressing room. They could go to talk to Lady Minstrel. They could go and talk to Jade. They could go and they could even talk to Snow's parents if they wanted to. I had that kind of half plotted out in my mind. Is a thing. But I also knew that there were other things they could do. You know, they could have gone to Snow's apartment. There were things there that apparently I misinterpreted, in that they had actually fought in his home. Okay, I remember things incorrectly, but you know, whatever. Or outside his apartment, yeah. And so it's allowing... I mean, you can, I guess, as a DM, if you feel that they're getting super stuck or they're going off in the wrong direction, you know, you could maybe find an NPC or you know, sprinkle in somebody who wasn't originally planned to kind of put them back on the right direction. But I almost feel like it would kind of wrap itself up once they get to the end. And I think that part of the whodunits is the fun part is making the wrong assumptions and kind of seeing where those lead you, and then making the, you know, going back and reevaluating what you found and moving forward again. So what was the other part of that question? Or did I answer
it?
It
was when they're stuck, and worse, they come to the wrong conclusion.
Ah, okay. I covered both of those. So yeah, yeah, with these it's just trying to determine or at least make some logical jumps of where people might think. For example, you know, with the box of gifts, which they took and they have and they looked at, but they never did anything with it. If they wanted to, they could have taken the jewelry to a jeweler and maybe see if they recognized the craftsmanship or found out who ordered the jewelry, which is another avenue that they could have taken. So it's, you know, what do you plant and where can that go? Where can it lead? What can it be used to kind of point your characters back to point, you know, to the final destination? So, but yeah. So it's a juggling act. And I probably made them super easy because it was my first time kind of writing them. So it's very plethora. There was a plethora of clues.
We were also incredibly dumb.
No, not really. I mean, the only thing I really didn't anticipate was the jam session. That was purely... That was all. I have no idea what the fuck the players were thinking, but you know what? Let's roll with it.
And Verity's seduced bad guy strategy.
So, I mean, it's, you know, once they kind of get the scent, it's, at that point, you have no control over what the players are going to do. So it's, yeah. Just kind of sit back and hold on to the reins and hope you don't go over a cliff. But I enjoy that part of D&D a lot. I enjoy the free form. I enjoy the spontaneity and watching my players come up with crazy ideas and just being like, that's what you think! Because I feel then very clever that no one's gotten onto my story and what I was thinking. So it's a great ego boost for me. So there's giggling. What's going on?
There's a fight for Susie's hand going on in the chat. You can continue talking.
What about my hand?
Do orcs make beautiful lovers?
They do.
There you go.
There we go. All right then.
I think orc ladies are hot. Yeah, Kamala agrees with me. You want to come say hi to the camera? No. Okay. No. I almost had a cat for you guys, but no, not so much.
I mean, I can just throw one at you.
I mean, it's not that hard. She's kind of slow and dumb.
Yeah.
It's fine.
She's like, are you going to feed me? You're going to feed me? It's a cat. Hi. Oh, no. Come here.
Does not like life right now.
Say hi.
She's shy.
Bullshit.
Camera
Say
shy.
hi.
Bullshit.
She's actually a very tolerant cat for the most part. Okay, calm down.
She scrambles to get away.
But yeah, I have sheafs of notes in regards to the following things that my players will do, and I have one for, this is all for Evelyn here, these 2 pages, and then everybody else in the back.
A very tolerant cat, she says, as her hands become chainsaws. Did you read any mysteries in preparation for the mystery sessions?
No. I mystery books aren't really like my cup of tea when it comes to books. I guess the closest thing is probably that I watch like not CSI, but like Criminal Intent, NCIS, which I haven't watched any of those recently, but that was kind of my inspiration. I like those shows. I think they're kind of nifty. I know they're totally and completely over dramatized, but I mean, it's television. What are you gonna do?
What are your favorite mystery scenarios, if you have any?
Oh God. Oh God. I when I'm watching TV and I get into those like the murder mystery, like NCIS, things like that, I find the killers who appear very sane and have a very logical reason for the reason why they did all these horrible things. I find those people to be highly fascinating and highly creepy. But I'm also very terrible at writing bad people. Just because that's not how my mind works. So it's a very big stretch for me to go from like lawful good, which is me, to like lawful evil, which is totally not me. So to write those kinds of things is very difficult. But it's, I guess in the long run for the story, my bad guy is kind of drawing off of those aesthetics, if you will, the murderous bastard who is very precise in how he thinks and very logical in why he's doing these things. So it's
You're on question duty and feeding them.
Okay.
But yeah, that's kind of my thing as far as mysteries. But I also find like there was an attempted murder. Who did it? You know, your favorite character as far as like books that I've read. Mercedes Lackey comes to mind because I'm actually gonna pick up on a book that I've been reading, or a series I've been reading over the past couple of years. That, you know, there's been a murder attempt on one of the main characters' life, and you have to figure out who it is, and you know, they get into really precarious situations in order to figure it out and to capture the guy who did it. So I like those kinds of scenarios too. The thrill of the danger is interesting to me. And as a reader, it draws me in. Maybe one day I'll be able to create something like that for my players. I don't know. Who knows? So.
Alright, so the question from Orcs Make Beautiful Lovers said, I have a real DM question for real. What are your thoughts on fakey classing? Example, a bard-ass named Sailor Orc Moon pretending to be a magical girl. Is it cheating?
I mean, it would basically just be a really big performance check from the bard. So I don't know that it would be quote-unquote cheating. It would just be a very elaborate ruse that the bard is putting up, which, I mean, if that's what you want to do as a player, go for it. I mean, if that's your style of play, which sounds like would be crazy fun and ridiculous, you know, if that's the kind of style you and your other players want to go for, by all means. If the DM is for it, by all means, because that sounds hilarious. But I mean, as a DM, I mean, if you want to dress it up and have that kind of thing where, you know, your bard pretends to be a magical schoolgirl, I would probably just, like, it's a really elaborate performance check. So that's what I would do.
Orcs Make Beautiful Lovers also wanted to know, are bards OP?
I don't think so. Not in 5e. I think they've become a jack of all trades, so they're not really good at all the things, and they're very much a support class, which makes them good for heals, AoEs, status effects, that kind of stuff, which is very helpful for a party. But I haven't found them to be overly powered in 5e. Not that I have much... Not that I have much recognition, because a lot of the stuff I played in 3.5, and 4... I won't say that bards are great, because the 4th edition experience I had with someone who played a bard was, I think, more along the lines of the player just being crazy and not the actual class, so I can't say. But in 3.5, I never played with anyone who ever played a bard, so I have no comparison. But I haven't found, at least with the players that I have currently, that bards are crazy. So,
sorry, there's no current questions. But Bad 007 said, best jack of all trades, Tempest Cleric. And Orcs Make Beautiful Lovers said, I'm gonna stop you right at Cleric.
Alrighty then. There's a throwdown in the chat. Goodness gracious. So.
Oh, and Judy Blackcloud jumped in with rogues.
I mean, yeah, rogues are very good at being jack of all trades as well. But they are very specialized in. They can also be very pointed. That was a bad pun. In what they do and their style of being a rogue. But again, that's all classes. Is you know, there's always a caveat or a niche that particular class or type of class, that archetype tries to fill. Which is one of the things I really love about 3.5 as far as their character and their class options, is that they really, you know, it rather than keep expanding and expanding and expanding in all of these classes like they tried to do in 4E with, you know, like wardens and rune keepers and avengers and all these crazy ass things. Like, I really like that they've kept it to like the basic, 10 classes, and they've basically just made archetypes off of all of those. I'm kind of disappointed that rangers are now the ones with animal companions and not druids, because I desperately want one in my with Badger, but I'll live. That's just a minor cosmetic thing, though.
So, Bad 007 wants to know, what's been your most creative way for someone to solve a puzzle?
Ooh, like, just in general, as far as, like, players just going off the weird ways of being, I don't know how to answer that question.
Sure, what's the weirdest way someone solved the puzzle?
It would have to go to Andy. The fucking, here's a moral choice, A or B. She picked C.
A or B. I'm gonna go option Z. What? No.
Basically. So I was running a 4E campaign many years ago in my first forays into DMing, and I had a very Mulligan-esque go fetch all of these things in order to save the world kind of over the top bullshitty campaign. And the very, like, one of their very first quests is that you had to go meet one of the metallic dragons, pass their test in order to gain their favor, basically. So, and this was, like, Andy's, one of her very first games. And so they'd run it, I think it was, like, I don't remember the metallic dragon, but it was, like, in an acid cave or whatever. And there was no torch, so she pulled off her cloth armor, wrapped it on a stick, light that on fire for a torch. So, I mean, cloth armor offers, like, no protection. So, I mean, it wasn't that she was losing armor. Proceeded to then run in the cave with everyone else. They got to a fork in the acid path, if you will. On one side, you could push the boulder that was sitting in the like the joining of the path. You could push it on top of a clutch of eggs to get to the gold, or you could push the boulder towards the gold, save the eggs, and go towards the dragon. So Andy says, how heavy is the boulder? And I said, about 1,000 pounds. She goes, 1,000 pounds exactly? I'm like, yeah. She's like, I cast Tinser's floating disc and lift the boulder. And I'm like, what? I'm sorry, what? And you know, I've from very early on in my DMing style, I've never been the one to say no necessarily, at least with magic, because magic allows you to do crazy things to begin with. So she proceeded to then lift said boulder, drop it away from the eggs, save the eggs, and then they proceeded on to the treasure, which was an illusion to test them to see whether they were greedy or whether or not they were empathetic. And they were both. So the dragon was like, I don't know what to say to you. Okay, well, here's your thing. Go on your way. Be gone.
Put on some clothes.
So that was probably the craziest and most unexpected thing that I've ever seen someone do to solve a puzzle, which was literally choose option C, which wasn't in my playbook.
Oh, what about the time I broke the fight? When I used the magical thing to fix all the deformities, and you were like, we have to end the fight here because I don't know what to do now. And then we picked it back up at Jackie's house.
I don't remember that one.
Oh, okay then. Okay.
I don't remember that fight. Nope. I'm sure there were a lot of different things that happened in my DMing experiences. They've been so I'm looking forward to see what crazy bullshit comes up with this one. I like the jam session outside of the area or outside of the nests of the griffins was as of this point like one of those moments where I was like, oh, okay, this is an interesting way to solve guess we're doing this. But it worked out in the end, and I definitely, you know, I was willing to kind of give things to them for being creative. I mean, there was, you know, I could have said nothing happened, and they just put on a big show for no fucking reason, but it seemed pointless, you know? So.
All right, I opened this one up because I said, does anyone else have any questions? And Orcs Make Beautiful Lovers asked, if Reptar got into a fight with Godzilla, who would win?
I don't know. Because one, I've never watched any of the Godzilla movies. And two, I was one of those weird kids who like alternatively loved Rugrats and hated Rugrats because it alternatively amused me and annoyed the ever-loving shit out of me. Which a lot of the Nickelodeon cartoons did when I was younger. So I'm gonna respectfully say I don't fucking know.
The answer is Godzilla.
And tap out.
The answer is Godzilla. It's always Godzilla.
Gojira! I got nothing else unless anyone else has any other questions. My advice for writing whodunits, don't be stingy on the clues and go with the punches. And have a knowledge of what the fuck happened beforehand. So that way you can kind of navigate what questions people ask and that kind of stuff. So, simple, basic stuff. And, you know, you can always go on Reddit, which has a shit ton of advice, because that's what I did. So if no other questions, I guess we'll wrap it up for the evening. And I really appreciate you guys for coming out tonight and participating. We will have our weekly game this Friday at 8 o'clock. Eastern Standard Time. I was trying to confirm in my head what time it actually started. And then, of course, we won't have our Saturday session because that will be the weekend after. But we will see you, of course, the following Wednesday for another DM chat, our Friday night game, and our bi-weekly Saturday game. Everything starts at 8 except for Zero, which starts at 12. So, thank you guys again so much for joining. Check us out on Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, social media websites. And if you have any questions that happen to pop into your mind after the fact, give us a holler. And we'll see you Friday. Bye.
Bye.